Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Beyond the Headlines here at the Post and Courier. I'm Andy Shain, managing editor for Post and Courier Columbia. I run the Columbia newsroom for the state's largest newspaper. Today, we have a very heavy topic, a topic that's in a lot of ways has obviously angered a lot of people, made a lot of people sad. It was the disappearance and killing of 6-year-old Faye Swetlik, a bubbly first grader who was playing at her home when she was abducted. Police looked for her for 3 days, and then they found her body, and eventually they found her killer. Here with me today is Jessica Holdman, a reporter here at Post and Courier Columbia. She's been working with us for 2 years, and she has been covering the Faye Swetlik case since Faye went missing back in February 2020. First of all, I want to point out that in the chat section at some point soon, you'll be able to see Jessica's email, her Twitter handle, as well as a link to our latest story concerning Faye's case. In fact, it just it'll be there very soon. Also want to let you know that you can submit questions to us anytime. There's a Q&A function. We'll be happy to take appropriate questions if you want to submit them. So we'd obviously like to hear from you as well. Again, thank you for being with us today. And Jessica, thank you for taking the time and being with us. Jessica, just for those who don't know sort of the whole thing, the whole story behind Faye Swetlik and why this is such a big deal, could you just quickly summarize a little bit of just sort of how we got to where we are, and of course why we're talking today a little bit, and what was the new news?
Sure. So this was a case that took place back in February of 2020. Faye Swetlik, a 6-year-old living in Casey in the Churchill Heights neighborhood, located near the Columbia Airport, the interstate's right there. She went missing while playing in her front yard after school, something that neighbors said she did often, and ultimately led to a 3-day manhunt searching for the girl. Started February 10th when she got off the school bus, and eventually ended 3 days later, February 13th, when her body was found near her home. It was a case that really gripped this small town. A lot of the officers involved had never experienced anything of this nature. There were more than 300 federal, state, and local police officers on scene. Grid searches were being conducted. Helicopters were flying over. Canine units were out there. They searched pools. They searched people's homes. They searched vehicles. Even lifted the manhole covers off of the drains in the street to see if she had accidentally slipped in there. And again, just something that really gripped even national headlines for days as this went on.
The reason we're talking today is that, we put in, of course, public records requests with the police about the case, wanting to know more about what happened. They released dozens and dozens of pages of documents that we were able to get on Friday and able to report on. So from the new information that we were able to get from the KC police, what did we learn about the case?
Sure. A lot of the new information that came out was related to the killer's actions in the days after her disappearance. The man, a 30-year-old neighbor named Cody Taylor, was seen on surveillance video behaving erratically at Walmart, where he had gone to purchase gardening supplies. There were various statements from people who had talked to him during the days, including the clerk at the store, a Lyft driver who had given him a ride back to his apartment, statements from his roommate reflecting on some odd behaviors, such as a deodorizing spray that was sprayed around the apartment, something Cody Taylor had never done before. And so it really detailed his movements and gave us some insight into who he was as a person as well.
Let's go ahead and go back a little bit. And of course, some of the things that we had reported on initially about the case, sort of, there were some more details that I think that came out of the documents that we got last week. Talk a little bit about that search. Okay, Faye is her mother has discovered her missing. She calls 911. The police show up. Take us through a little bit about those first days of just trying to find Faye and trying to figure out what happened and the difficulties that the authorities had.
Sure. So the authorities interviewed Faye's mother and Faye's live-in boyfriend extensively, multiple interviews. They submitted to a polygraph test as well. But they also went door to door through the neighborhood, speaking to everyone and asking consent to search inside their homes. They also searched the home of Cody Taylor and his roommate twice, actually, once on February 11th and February 12th. And I think a lot of the difficulty was that they were really coming up with no leads, nothing that pointed them in a specific direction. Even the night before that Faye Swetlik was found, there are notes in there from the investigator that stated they hadn't even ruled out Faye's mother and boyfriend completely at that point, even though there had been evidence that the boyfriend was not at home at the time that Faye went missing. So again, just kind of running into nothing specific until the day that they had stopped the trash pickup from being taken and found pieces of evidence in the trash, a boot, a soup ladle with dirt on it that led them to Faye. Faye had been wearing the boots, and the soup ladle led them to believe she might have been buried in the nearby woods.
And again, the coincidence of all this is the police chief found her after they found this evidence in the trash can. And one of the more amazing parts of the story is the fact that the man in charge was the one who actually discovered her body.
Right.
So at this point they're searching, and they're not really ruling out any suspects in those first couple of days. They don't have a clue. They're not, obviously Cody did not show up on their radar. But when they did search his apartment, did they find something, or did they note anything interesting in their apartment that maybe led them to, obviously looking back over the case, maybe led them to think that obviously this is where Cody kept Faye? Sure.
So the first search they had conducted on February 11th, Cody Taylor was actually not home at the time, but his roommate was, and allowed police to come in and conduct the search. And in their notes, they note a black laundry bag that was found in the cabinet under the stairs. And after having found Faye, they had gone back. They had found the laundry bag empty. So they took it in for DNA analysis and found traces of Faye's DNA on the inside of the bag, which is what led them to believe that's where he had been keeping her body.
What do we know about Cody Taylor, and did he know Faye's family?
Sure. There's no evidence that Cody Taylor and Faye Swetlik and her mother and her boyfriend knew each other. This was backed up by statements that the Swetlik family made. This is backed up by DNA evidence. There's no evidence that either had been in each other's homes. And there's also computer records that were searched that show really no connection between the two. What we do find out about Cody Taylor is largely from police interviews with former roommates, current roommates, people that he was friends with online. A lot of them described him as a bit of a loner, a shut-in. He went to work, He came home from work, he played video games. They also described him as very smart. He really kept to himself. He had grown up in Bluffton, but and that his family was still back there, but had gone to University of South Carolina, worked at a local restaurant, or several local restaurants after, and that's where a majority of the people he associated with were also from.
The people they talked to, the former roommates, other people, was anybody expecting this? Were people surprised?
Everyone was surprised. No one described him as violent, but a lot of them did say he had been suffering from depression. He had made statements contemplating suicide on several occasions. So they were worried about him in that sense, but ultimately, they described him as a quiet person, someone who wouldn't have done something like this.
At the same time, was there any indication of anything that the police found that would say, oh, this was someone who would commit an act like this, and anything that was revealed in the records that were released on Friday?
Right. I think that's one of the remaining questions we have. There's really no motive that's been established. There was no suicide letter that would have pointed them to Taylor. The only thing that we know is that he really didn't have an alibi during the time that Faye went missing. He stated he'd been at home sleeping during that time. But other than that, there had been no indication that he would have acted in this way.
By the way, just a reminder to folks who are watching, please, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A chat there at the bottom of your Zoom. And so if you could, that would be great. We'd be happy to answer questions. But getting back to Cody, again, what did we learn from the documents that the police released about what he did during the days while the police were searching for Faye, still thinking she may be missing, maybe thinking that she had walked away, maybe was in the hands of a relative. But he was obviously doing some things during those days, and especially the morning before her body was found. Right.
So we have notes of when he went to and from work. We have his work schedule. His roommate was the one that largely drove him to and from work. But what really stood out were, again, his actions the day before she was found and in the early morning hours, the day she was found. Most notably, he walked to a local Walmart, and while he was there, he shopped in the garden department. There he bought seeds, he bought potting supplies, and he asked about the garden tools. And he made some odd statements to a clerk that was helping him out, stating he hadn't gardened since he was a young boy and didn't really know much about it. And the clerk said he didn't really seem to have much of a plan for how he was going to put this garden together. Just grab some random seeds off the shelf and ask where the gardening tools were. He would check out from Walmart around 7 a.m. and call a Lyft driver for a ride home, which was kind of an oddity for him as well. Most of the time he got rides from his roommate and to and from his apartment. And when he was in the Lyft, he made some odd statements. The Lyft driver realized he had been taking him back to the neighborhood where Faye had gone missing, and he asked him, "Oh, did you know the girl?" And he kind of stammered and kept saying, "No, I don't know her, I don't know her." And when police contacted the Lyft driver and made no statements about, what they wanted to talk to him about, the Lyft driver knew exactly who they were going to be asking him about without being prompted. So clearly, Taylor's behavior made an impression. So he got back to the apartment, and there is video evidence that is contained in the file of items shared with us. And in there you see a dark hooded figure in the early morning hours in the woods. Appears to be carrying a bag. We believe it was the potting soil that he had just purchased from the Walmart. And though you can't really identify the figure in the video, and it's stated in the reports that the resolution was not good enough to identify the person, they are wearing dark clothing, which was similar to the clothing Cody was seen wearing when he had made his trip to Walmart. That same kind of potting soil was also found later in a closet behind, or in a storage closet on the backside of his apartment.
It's interesting that, that there was some activity going on, but again, no one really knew what was happening, knew what he was doing, and that he had a role in all of this. And it really appears that the police don't have a lot of information, at least what was released to the media, about, again, how he managed to hide her for 3 days, besides the laundry bag situation. It was just interesting that I think that this, normally you sometimes get a little more resolution, I think, in this case than we still have a lot more questions. And the other part of it too, I guess, is that, how is it that you had hundreds of law enforcement officers, from the local police to the county, to the sheriff, to the SLED, to the FBI, yet her body didn't seem to really maybe even leave the apartment complex, and they weren't able to find her until he, clearly what the police were saying is that he buried her at some point near his apartment, and then I went to Walmart and bought more material to make that happen. Is that you think what's baffling a lot of people, is that sort of how could Cody have hidden her? How could Cody have buried her with all of this law enforcement presence that was in the neighborhood at the time?
Yeah, and that's actually, it's a question we asked of KC police, and we didn't necessarily get a very clear answer. KC police has also stated that they won't take any further questions or talk about this case further after the date that they released all of this information. So it is confusing why when they were searching the apartment, why they did not look inside the laundry bag, given that they were looking in kitchen cabinets in other folks' homes. A question we have for SLED, the State Law Enforcement Division, who is yet to release their portion of documents related to this investigation. They had been there with canine units, and we kind of wonder why they didn't use the dogs in the search of the homes. Maybe that would have turned something up, but again, it's just a lot of unknowns as to why they didn't search this bag that was under the stairs. And it's not clear when they returned to the home on the 12th whether the bag was still there when officers re-entered the home. There is body camera footage of the search, but again, that was not shared with us. It is in South Carolina, it does not necessarily have to be shared. It is up to the discretion of the law enforcement agency whether they choose to do that or not. And in this case, they did not include it in part of their release. And so, we're just left wondering, and we don't know whether we will get an answer to that question.
And as I said, it'll be interesting to see. And some of the video that Jessica's talking about that was released is in the story, the link to the story that we did publish. You can watch the video that KC police did share, notably of Cody going to the Walmart, especially, but also a shot taken from a nearby business of the site where Faye was buried. Where you can see some of the activity, where you do see someone in the morning bringing what looks to be a bag to the spot, where a little bit later you see the police chief, police chief Snellgrove, finding her body. But again, as you said, it wasn't everything. It got us some more information almost a year and a half after this incident. And it sort of also begs the other question of they closed the case in April. They said, we're in April of 2020, they said, actually, we're done with the case according to the documents. So why did it take so long for us to get these files? And what is it that that the public hasn't maybe seen, perhaps it's in the possession of SLED or the FBI or maybe even the coroner's office?
Sure. I don't really have a good answer for you as to why it did take this long. I will remind those of us who may have forgotten that not long after this, the coronavirus came to South Carolina, and so it did take up a lot of resources. But ultimately, why KCPD waited this long before fulfilling the FOIA request is unknown. Some of the things that were not shared, again, are property of the FBI and of SLED. Some of those include audio recordings of interviews done with the parents, written statements that were made by, again, Faye's parents and grandmother. We don't have the computer history of Cody Taylor. Again, no body camera footage was shared, which included some interviews and the search of Cody Taylor's apartment. But at least in the investigative reports that were released, there are some summaries of what might be included in these reports. I guess there's also reports on the DNA analysis, which was done by SLED, would be another item that hasn't been shared directly with us, but was at least summarized in these documents. So we have a little bit of a peek at what might be in those reports, but we haven't been able to independently verify it at this point.
And I think one thing we haven't mentioned also is that Cody committed suicide. Soon after they found her body, they found Cody at his apartment. He had actually slit his own throat, which apparently, and so that's part of the reason also why the case was closed, why we don't have a lot of information. We don't have Cody Taylor telling us what happened. And as far as we know, Jessica, right, we don't know of anyone who's been associated with this, any accomplices, anyone along those lines.
Right. Police have said they don't believe there have been any accomplices. There's no evidence that they have obtained pointing to that. They base a lot of this off of DNA analysis. The roommate, for instance, there's none of his DNA associated with the items involved in this case. Same for Faye Swetlik's parents. The knife that Cody Taylor used, only his DNA is on that. An FBI pathologist who reviewed photos said there were hesitation marks, and in similar cases that they'd experienced, it matched with suicide and Taylor being the sole actor in his own death. And again, his is the only other DNA associated with the items that were found around Faye Swetlik, and his DNA is the sole DNA that was found under her fingernails.
And as I recall, so his DNA and her DNA was found on the ladle as well, that was found in the trash can.
On the ladle, yes.
So again, if there's any questions for folks having that Cody Taylor was involved in this, I think one of the things I think made clear by the documents that were released was that he was the sole person at least involved in this, as far as what the police have shared with us. Jessica, I've been asked, and is that as reporters and as an editor as well, how is it to cover something like this? How do you we're human beings, we're reporters, we're professionals, we do our jobs, but at some point we stop being reporters and we go on our normal lives. We're also human beings. How do you deal with a situation? How have you dealt with this situation of covering this story? I was a 6-year-old someone who, and of course you watching what her mother went through, watching what her family went through. Obviously, that's what the police, and the town felt. Explain to folks as a reporter how you work through that professionally, and not basically lose yourself.
Right. I think the key is to show as much care as possible to folks that you're talking to, be as respectful as possible. For me, when I go out and I talk to folks, I really try and put the power in their hands, whether they want to share their story with me. A lot of times I understand that they're still processing a lot of this. I had actually spoken with Faye Swetlik's grandmother in the days that this was happening, and it was very difficult for her. But we took our time as we talked about it. There were a few cry breaks, but just really trying to have as much empathy as possible, and taking whatever time the family needs in order to be comfortable talking about this. I also spoke with Faye's mother and father around the anniversary of her death. And again, it was a lot of reflecting on Faye and their memories of her. But, and I guess for us as reporters, when we are out there covering these difficult topics, we also have to do sort of mental checks of ourselves. I have nieces and nephews that are close to Faye's age. And so when you think about those types of things that seem unimaginable, you can go to some weird places or go to some dark places. But I think the Post and Courier does a good job of supporting its reporters. And I know if I needed to talk about things that folks would definitely be there. And I guess also a shout out to the Department of Corrections. They were kind enough during the days that reporters were going through this and being out there that they brought a therapy dog out to out to one of the press conferences and just kind of did a mental health check with us as reporters too, just to make sure we were all doing okay.
Well, and one thing I would say again, as someone who's done this a long, long time, we have a job to do. And, one of the things I always want to stress is that people think, oh, you're not caring, you're not this, you don't have any feelings. No, I've got a job, and so does Jessica, and so do all the other reporters. We need to tell you the news, tell it to you accurately. Obviously, we're trying to get it quickly. We're trying to be thorough, and as Jessica said, we're trying to be compassionate. We understand sometimes when authorities say, please don't bother the family, please don't do this. But at the same time, we want to hear from the family. We want to talk to them, and we want to try. They can say no, and we respect that. And that's fine. And sometimes they do want to talk, or they want to hold a news conference, and we will cover that and go from there. But we do have a job, and we need to sort of at times remember what our jobs are and to cover the news and not get caught up in what's happening. That said, as Jessica said, when the shift is over and you have time to think, sometimes it gets really heavy. And it was heavy to work on Friday as a father. Sorry. That said, I want to thank Jessica for being here today, and thank everybody for participating and watching. I want to thank everyone who supports the Post and Courier. Again, we try our best to be a very thorough news organization, a very comprehensive news organization. And again, if we fall short of that, we want to hear from you. So I want to remind you that we have newsletters that you can get, you can sign up for. You can go on postandcourier.com/Columbia and sign up for our newsletters. I want to also remind you that we are running a subscription sale, $4 for 4 months. It's a great deal. But if you happen to actually bump into one of us here in Columbia, we have a card that we can give you that gives you half off of an annual subscription. Also want to remind you for everyone today that we will email a recording of this event to you, as well as the fact that if somebody wanted to see this and missed it, it'll be up on YouTube, on our YouTube channel for the Post and Courier. So again, I want to thank Jessica for being here. I want to thank everyone for taking part, and obviously have a good week. Thank you.
Post and Courier, being here in Columbia, it's our goal to really help you understand the issues. The most important thing to me as a journalist is getting at those stories that no one else is going to tell and looking out for the people in the community where I live. Investing in a local news subscription is what allows our reporters to spend the time telling the stories that will have the most impact on your life.